Yes. Moments after Dr. Eldad speaks, we'll hear a few words from Mark Provizor, who's the Director of Security Projects for the One Israel Fund. Torah says, begins this week's Sedra with the Parsha of the Bikurim, the first fruits that every Jew has to bring to Yerushalayim every year. And as part of the ceremony of the offering of the Bikurim, he recites a certain text, which begins, Ki vati el haaretz asher nishba Hashem la'avotenu latet lanu, because I've come to the land that God promised to our forefathers. I've come to the land. So in fact, the text makes sense for the generation of the wilderness, actually coming to the land of Israel. But what sense would it make for a person who's living in Israel for decades, for generations, a descendant of families that have been there for centuries, to say, Ki vati el haaretz, because I've come to the land? He didn't come to the land. He was always in the land. I saw just this morning a pshat of Rav Shalom Horowitz, who's a Ram at the Yeshiva Shavei Chevron, and he said there's a great difference, as we know, between someone who comes to the land of Israel and someone who lives there. A person who comes there comes with a lot of history, with a lot of baggage, with an awareness of all the horrors that the Jewish people experienced over the centuries. He comes running to a refuge, to a homeland, and so every part of that homeland is precious to him. But one who's in the land already, doesn't have the sense that he's come from the outside, often becomes very nonchalant or lackadaisical, or to say it in a nicer way, he becomes satisfied, content with Israel as it is, and he's willing to make territorial sacrifices. He's not as insistent on retaining our ancestral land that God promised us. He's much more accommodating because he's accustomed to it. So Rav Horowitz writes from Chevron that the text of the person who brings Bikurim is always Ki vati el haaretz, I've come to the land. Those who feel that they're just coming to the land have a more intense connection. And those who are just coming to the land will always sense that our possession of the land is precarious because of the numerous enemies that surround us and even the challenges that exist within the land of Israel as well. We're blessed to have with us tonight a member of Knesset, a Jew, an individual who's been a fighter for the land of Israel and the people of Israel and the state of Israel for his entire life. And he's unwavering in his commitment, unwavering in his dedication. Nothing sways Dr. Arieh Eldad for support for the rights of the Jewish people in the entirety of the land of Israel. No media personality, no political critic. There's no one who can dislodge him from the firmness of his convictions. And in fact, I've been quite familiar with the Ichud Alumi and their platform for many years already. And I once asked Ketzel a few years ago, he was a guest in my house, and I said to him, everything seems so logical. How come most of the country doesn't support it? So he gave an answer that they're on their way, and I hope they're on the way. But it is an uphill battle. I reminded Dr. Eldad a few months ago, I was in the Knesset, and I had just an absolutely horrifying experience as with a group of rabbis that were listening to a member of Knesset from the Labor Party, Donny Ben-Simon. And he was going on and on about how the lack of peace is Netanyahu's fault, and it's our fault, and the first time in history there's a partner who wants to make peace, and all we do is slap him in the face and discourage them and build settlements, and everything is our fault. And after 5 minutes, really 10 seconds, but after 5 minutes I couldn't take any more of it, and I just walked out of the room. I walking through the Knesset, and in the hallway I saw a familiar face, and it was Dr. Eldad. And I said to him, said in Hebrew, I just came out of a meeting with Donnie Ben Simon. I don't understand. How could a person, after especially the events of the last 10 years, not to mention 2 years, how could he retain such policies? Well, there is no logical, no rational answer for it. But I was comforted by the fact I had a friendly face to whom I could pour out my lament. But there is a struggle. The struggle is inside Israel, and the struggle now is outside Israel as well. We're all aware next week of the anticipated events at the UN. Whether it has any effect in the real world or not remains to be seen, but there's no doubt for people of unassuageable grievances who don't need a pretext for violence, undoubtedly it will be used as a pretext for violence. And so we have to be strong, and we have to be secure in our convictions, and we have to understand that when we say there really are no leaders to turn to, in fact there are such leaders, and we should get behind them and support them and try to move their policies forward. Dr. Arieh Eldad for many years was the chief medical officer of the IDF, and for most of the last decade has served as a member of Knesset, most recently from Ichud Alumi, the National Union Party, and it's a great privilege to welcome him to our shul and a personal pleasure to present tonight for a few words of chizuk, but reality as well, the reality that's before us, Chaver Knesset, Dr. Arieh Eldad.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind words. I'll tell you a story. It's a story about a king who had a horse. The most beautiful, the most precious horse in the world. And he was afraid that someday a thief will come and steal his horse. So he built a concrete stable with iron gates and put some steel locks at the gate. And still he was afraid that a thief will come and break the locks and steal his horse. It's a beautiful horse, tall, blonde, the fastest, with pedigree go back to King Solomon's stables. You can't insure such a horse, it's priceless. So he got a guard, and he gave him a chair, and he put him at the entrance of the stable, and he ordered him to stay awake all night. And if somebody will come to steal the horse, he should make a lot of noise, and they will catch him. And it's written, "Uvalayla ahu nadeda shnat hamelech." The king couldn't fall asleep. He was afraid that the guard fall asleep. So he went to check on the guard. Comes to the stable, Baruch Hashem. The guy sits there awake as a bird. And the king asked him, "What are you doing in order not to fall asleep?" He said, "In order not to fall asleep, I occupy my mind with philosophical things." So, give me an example to such a deep philosophical thought. He said, for example, I thought tonight, if I eat a pretzel, where does the hole goes to? The king was very happy. He said, "Keep thinking like that and you will not fall asleep." The next night, he goes to check on the guard. The guy is there and he's not asleep, and he asks him, What do you think about tonight? He said, "Tonight, for example, I noticed that if I go with my kids to the beach and we dig in the sand, and we make a hole in the sand, and then we want to cover it, there's not enough sand. She'ein habor maleh michulyato. If you remove some sand from a pit and then you cover it, as if some sand disappeared. Where did the sand disappear to? The king was extremely satisfied. He found a god, a philosopher, a physicist, and an idiot in one. Go on, think like this, you won't fall asleep. The third night he goes to the stable and the guard is there and he asks him, what do you think about tonight? He said, for example, I noticed something very interesting. Here, a concrete stable, iron gates, steel locks, a guard. How did they manage to steal the horse? It's a story that I've learned from my father. My father wrote this book that I'll give your rabbi with a deep appreciation. He said it's not a story about a horse and not a king. It's mashal and nimshal. It's a proverb. And it's the story about the people of Israel and the land of Israel. Look, for 2,000 years we were in diaspora. We were nothing. Dust. Everybody could do whatever they want with us. If they want to organize a pogrom, they organize a pogrom. If they want to exile the Jews from Spain or from England, they did it. If they want to build gas chambers, they just had to shift the Jews to the gas chambers. We didn't have a state, we didn't have an army, we didn't have anyone to protect us. Still, in this very poor existence, all over the globe, the Jews preserved a very simple fact. They all knew that even though they suffer in diaspora, somewhere far, the land of Israel is waiting for us. And they knew that the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. As simple as that. Now look what happened. With God's help, with Zionism, we came back to Israel. We have a state. We built a concrete stable. We have a guard. We have an army. We have the IDF. And they stole the horse. The very simple truth that the land of Israel belonged to the people of Israel is stolen. Half of the people who lives in Israel, Daniel ben Simon and his friends and his alike, they'll tell you that there's the Arab narrative and the Jewish narrative, and we have to respect both, and the Arabs are there and they are entitled to have a state. In my homeland, the horse was stolen. The horse that was kept in appalling condition, in unimaginable condition. The Jews kept this truth for 2,000 years. They came to Israel for the best condition to preserve and to implement it. Half of the people who walked around in Israel now, they are not sure that the land is ours. The Arabs also claim it. They were there for 1,300 years or so. Let's compromise. In the beautiful video that you've seen, there was a lot of arguments to explain why we need Judea and Samaria for security reasons. Wrong. We need it because this is our homeland, not because of anything else. It's true, it's much easier to defend Israel from Judea and Samaria. It's almost impossible to do it without it. But this is not the reason to be there. The reason to be there is because the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel as written in the Torah. And we found ourselves time and again trying to justify by external reasons why we have to be there. There isn't a nation in the world that will give up parts of his homeland even if it is not crucial for his security. Only in Israel you can find people that it's not so natural for them, it's not basic for them to say, this is my homeland, I will kill everybody who will try to touch it. Why is that? It's one of the anomalies of the Jewish people and the redemption movement of the Jewish people, the Zionism. We saw in Europe, in many other parts of the world, liberation movement at the 19th century. And the only problem that the Italian had was that they had to get rid of the occupier power, the French, the Austro-Hungarian, whatever. They had to fight them, to send them home, and that's it. The liberation movement of the Jewish people actually had a double task. They had to bring Jews from diaspora and to liberate the land. On that complicated road, something went wrong. The land of Israel became a tool instead of being a value on its own. It was a tool to save Jews. It was a safe haven for Jews who were refugees, who were persecuted all over the world. They needed a state. It's a state for refugees. It is not true. Zionism is a liberation movement to liberate the land of Israel from its occupiers, at least as it is a liberation movement of Jews from diaspora. It's a double mission. But because it was so difficult, because we were persecuted, because we were so few, we were so happy that we had something that we tend to forget the value to liberate our homeland, a mission by itself. And you found a lot of people in Israel who said, okay, we have a state, let the Arab have a state, and we will have peace. Now I'm a physician. If a patient would come to me, they usually don't come to me on this. If they need a skin graft, they would come. But let's say that they would come to me with sore throat. I would take a torch and or flashlight and a tongue depressor, and I'll ask him to say and I'll examine him. I may reach the conclusion that the patient has some strep throat. I'll prescribe him some penicillin. He will go away for a week or so. Usually it works. If it's not, he will come back to me and say, it's a wonderful medication you gave me, doctor. The only one problem, it didn't work. Actually, it got worse. I'll ask him to open his mouth again. I'll re-examine him. I may reach the conclusion that maybe the bacteria in his throat are not sensitive to the antibiotics that I prescribed him. Therefore, I should change the antibiotics. That's a reasonable conclusion. Usually it works. If it won't work, usually the patient will change a doctor. But let's assume there's only one doctor in town. He will crawl back to the clinic and say, well, it didn't work. I may try a third antibiotics, and a fourth one, and a fifth one. Either the patient will die or he'll sue me for malpractice. There must be a point in time where the reasonable physician will stop and think, maybe I misdiagnosed the disease, therefore the antibiotics is not going to cure the patient. Well, it's not about horses and not about medicine, what I'm telling you today. A lot of people in Israel and many people in the world are exceedingly frustrated, more and more frustrated, because these stupid two peoples in the Middle East cannot reach a peace solution. They have a territorial conflict, two nations fighting over a piece of land for 100 years or so. The obvious conclusion, the obvious treatment for such a conflict is the division of the land. We'll draw a border on the map. They will be there, we will be here, and that's it. Baruch Hashem, we'll have peace. That's really brilliant. So simple. The only problem, it didn't work. Not only it didn't work, but it didn't work about 25 times. But we repeat the definition of Albert Einstein to insanity. He said that if you'll repeat the same action again and again and again, it will be insanity to hope that in the next time the result will be different. It's not going to be different. We had the Balfour Declaration, the San Remo Declaration that granted Britain a mandate over Palestine in order to fulfill the Balfour Declaration and to build a Jewish homeland in Palestine on both sides of the Jordan River. The British Mandate map, the Arab didn't like the idea. They start riots. Soon enough came Winston Churchill. At that time he was the Minister for the Colonies, and he divided the land. That's the brilliant two-state solution. He gave three-quarters, he didn't measure it exactly, so he gave three-quarters to the Arabs. Transjordan. On the way, he solved some other problem that the British Empire had. They had some commitment for the Hashemite at the end of First World War in Hijaz. He created a new state. At the beginning, it was the Transjordan Arab Emirate with the Emir Abdallah. Later, in 1946, they declared their independence. They became the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. If we had a territorial conflict, that should be enough. But the Arab didn't like the idea. They started the next set of riots in 1929. A new committee came to advocate another map, the Peel Committee, the MacDonald Committee, the Anglo-American Committee, the UNSCOP Committee. At last, the 181 resolution of the United Nations General Assembly in November 29, 1947, the division of Palestine. Each attempt ended in a bloodbath or a war. We keep prescribing the same remedy, the two-state solution. Let's try it again. We misdiagnosed the disease. Therefore, we are so frustrated that this attempt to solve the conflict is not working. It's not a territorial conflict. This is a true religious war, true clash of ideologies. Usually we blame the other side, the Arabs. They are the bad guys, they are the radical Muslim. For them, the land of Palestine, the land of Israel is forever and ever a Waqf land. Waqf, a holy Muslim land that no Muslim is forever allowed to recognize the right of any infidel over the land. But it's not a unilateral religious war. I am there because of the Bible. I am there because this is my promised land. And the world recognized my right because they believed in what's written in the Bible. The Balfour Declaration, the San Remo Agreement are not the source of my right. This is only recognition of my right. So we have a true religious war, true clash of ideologies. And the bad news is that you don't solve this. Or if there is a solution to religious war, it's very gradual. It takes hundreds of years through education. Not by drawing some border on the map and deciding that this is going to bring peace, because it is not. Still, we are stuck with the fact that there's only one plan on the table, only one issue to discuss, the two-state solution. And because we were stubborn, and we didn't take the dictation of the White House, the Palestinians, whatever, the Palestinians get sick and tired and say, okay, we'll go unilaterally to the United Nations. They're going to do it next week. And we'll declare a state and you'll recognize us. About a month ago, one of the ministers of the government that was already a minister at the time of Camp David with Clinton and Arafat and Ehud Barak, published his memories from Camp David. And he said that one morning Arafat wake up and threatened that he will unilaterally declare a state. Immediately, Ehud Barak from the left of Israel, said that in that case Israel will annex Judea and Samaria. It was enough to stop Yasser Arafat. It should be enough to stop Abu Mazen. He's not such a hero. We don't do it. Even if we would explain the world and ourselves that the very first chapter of the Oslo Agreement called that the two sides take upon themselves not to create any unilateral changes in the status of the land. Unilateral declaration is a breach of the very first chapter of the agreement. The Oslo Agreement is off. Israel should say so and immediately stop streaming all the taxes and the money that we send to the Palestinian Authority. They will suffocate within a month. We don't have to shoot. We don't do it. When I visited the Congress last week, I spoke with about 20 congressmen and senators, and some told me that the White House and the Secretary of State sent a lot of letters to all the countries of the world asking them not to support the Palestinian request. A superpower can do more than sending letters. If President Obama really wanted to prevent a Palestinian from going to the United Nations, he could do it in no time. Not only is not doing that, he's putting tremendous amount of pressure on Netanyahu not to do anything to stop them. And Netanyahu works under gunpoint that if he will annex, United States will not veto their request in the Security Council. And if we will dare put some financial sanctions on the Palestinians, he will not veto them. There are local initiatives. Ross Lettinen, Joe Welch. Joe Welch put on a bill, he brought it to me fresh from the oven, that says that if the Palestinians will unilaterally declare a state, Israel should annex Judea and Samaria. That comes from the Congress, not from Ichud Leumi, National Union. The phone call from the White House to Netanyahu was to activate AIPAC in order to intersect all the local initiatives to prevent financial sanctions on the Palestinians. So on the open they say, yes, we are against the unilateral declaration. But the impression is that President Obama thinks that if the Palestinian will have a state that will be recognized by the United Nations, even though it will not change anything on the ground, he will have a softer Netanyahu when he will close Netanyahu and Abu Mazen in Camp David, trying to dictate the items of the agreement. The only thing that will happen will be a repeat of what happened in the year 2000. The level of expectations among Palestinians is very high. They expect Messiah to arrive immediately in October 2nd, 3rd. That's what they plan for him. They hope that they will have a state. The sun will rise at the west. Everything will be different. When nothing of this will happen, they will be very frustrated. They'll go to the street. Some people will encourage them to do so. And we will have another intifada, another war, another round of bloodshed, just because we keep prescribing the same old prescription. We have to annex Judea and Samaria, not because the Palestinians broke the agreement, but because this is our homeland. But if we didn't do it for 43 years or so, at least we should take advantage of the situation that the Palestinian creates for us. Call off the Oslo Agreement. We didn't do it. They broke it. Okay, let's enjoy it. But on the background of everything, there are two things that I want to refer to very shortly, and I'll finish with this. The Arab Spring. The Arab Spring will bring a lot of storms, and it's only these fools that try to rape reality to their wishful thinking way of methodology, that hope that this is going to bring democracy to the Middle East. It's true. Hundreds of thousands went to the squares, wanted liberties and rights and freedom. I trust them. But at the same time, the only organized political power in Egypt is the Muslim Brotherhood. So the masses will shout whatever they want. They did the work for the Muslim Brothers. Mubarak is in a cage. In the next election, they are not going to run for presidency. The troubles in Egypt are too big. They don't want to be blamed for failures. They want to have enough power to have an influence of the decision-taking, but not to be blamed for the failures, not in the first round. I guess, and my guess is as good as any others, that they will have 30% of the seats in the Egyptian parliament. 30% are not a majority. But look what Hezbollah is doing with 30% of the seats in Lebanon. People in the Middle East has this strange tendency to follow the guy with the big gun, or at least to obey him. Hezbollah has big guns. The Muslim Brothers in Egypt will have soon. And eventually we are going to find ourselves with a radical Muslim Egypt. We shut our eyes to see what happened in Turkey in the past 5, 6, 7 years, even more. The first alarm should be when they refused to allow US troops to go through Turkey to attack Iraq. We didn't understand it then. We thought it's a problem of interest, the delicate situation in the Arab world. Everything is true, but if we ignore the religious motivation behind everything, we'll misunderstand reality. And the same thing will happen in Syria. And the same thing will happen in Libya. And the good news is that the same thing is going to happen in Jordan. Why it's the good news? It's the only opportunity to break the equilibrium, to break the dead end that we are stuck in with this two-state solution. If King Abdullah will disappear tomorrow morning, I mean, if you're clever enough to load all the gold that he can get and go to London, before he will be put in a cage. And I've been to London, I've been to Amman, trust me, it's better for him to be in London. If he will disappear one morning, because the Palestinians are 80% of the population in Jordan, and they look around, they say if the Syrian can do it, the Egyptian could do it, why not us? Years ago, King Hussein was clever enough to say Jordan is Palestine and Palestine is Jordan, and whoever said differently is a traitor. But we betrayed him. Israel betrayed him. Because the understanding between Israel and Jordan since 1947, when Golda Meir, dressed as an Arab male, went across the Jordan and met Abdallah I, the great-grandfather of King Abdallah. And they understood that the greatest enemy of the Hashemite and the Israelis are the Palestinians. Haj Amin al-Husseini, the leader of the Palestinians, was the enemy. The invasion of the Arab Legion across the Jordan was to prevent him from creating a state. And the agreement between Abdallah and Golda Meir was a mutual recognition. We will recognize their occupation of the West Bank. They will recognize the Jewish state. They kept this agreement almost to the letter. We broke it in Lod and Ramle. They broke it in East Jerusalem. But other than that, they didn't try to occupy Tel Aviv. He was murdered before anything could happen. Murdered by Palestinians that saw this agreement. Even though it was secret, they understood that the only thing that the Hashemite did was to occupy what was promised to them. For years, the king and Israel looked at the Hashemite as the authentic representative of the Palestinian people. That was the only justification of this kingdom. We betrayed them. We recognized PLO as the authentic representative of the Palestinian in the Oslo Agreement. Since then, they want nothing from the Palestinian, from the West Bank. They want to survive.